I don't know what, I mean, I've never had the experience of introducing a possibly charismatic leader. I have a little John the Baptist feel about me, but also a look. My head is secure. You know, one starts off an introduction by saying, here's a person who needs no introduction. So then sit down. Basically, my friends, basically, Sherwin needs no introduction. His bio is in the program book, and we've done this before, all of us introducing. You read from the book that you have. So I'm going to simply repeat what Yaakov did when he stole my introduction, and that is to suggest that the founding of the Birmingham Temple, through the genius of Sherwin Wine, the loyalty and support of like-minded friends, very few at the beginning, was a monumental, significant event in Jewish history. And to hear from the person who was the force behind that event is a rare treat. Sherwin.
I'm really flattered by all the comments that have been made, but my mother always brought me down to the ground by saying, do you know, Sherwin, how many people you would have in this congregation if you only believed in God? All right. I want to explain less why we don't have young people here. There's a $150 charge for coming to this colloquium. And the only way we could afford to bring, we had generous patrons, but we also had to find other money. The only way we could bring all these wonderful people here was indeed to charge that amount. What we need to do is to have a colloquium with young Jewish people talking about what they want, and just throw it open. We have to find the people who are willing to pay for it and sponsor it so that we can have it. But that, I mean, it's like a big mystery.
Try milk it.
Yeah. Right. What I'd like to do is, Yaakov spoke very passionately about all the things from the past that we can use certainly in the future. What I want to do, because as we bring this thing to a close, we're looking at the future. We're going to use the past, but we're looking at the future. We're looking at the 21st century. So what we need to do is to say, what is that century going to be like if we're trying to reach the unaffiliated Jew? And the premises of my response are very simple. They're twofold. First of all, a free society is a good society. For all its disadvantages, whatever else it is, I personally do not wish to go back to the society of either tyranny or conformity that certainly guaranteed a certain kind of Jewish survival. I mean, that's it. I don't want to go back to it. And most people don't want to go back to it. The second premise is that I believe certainly that an active Jewish identity is good for the individual and for society. Otherwise, I wouldn't be advocating it. And what I'd like to do is to offer a set of guidelines that I see as the result of all the conversations that took place. I really enjoyed myself. Some of you may have noticed my face. All right. I felt like Egon, that I was in the company of people whom I deeply respected and I wanted to hear, and I loved the dialogue and the exchange, and we need 1,000 years to continue, but we don't have that much time to solve the problem in. So let me offer the guidelines that came from just listening. First, I was listening to Egon. I say it's Egon, I'm sorry. There are two. This is the first Jewish conference in the world with two Egons. Do you understand? Do you understand? No, this never happened before.
Which is the real one?
Right. All right. guideline one for the future is that expectations need to be appropriate. What Egon said very clearly was that we are now living in the world of the Jewish consumer. That's the 21st century, and Joel referred to it in some way. The Jewish consumer is not asking, what can I do for my people? The Jewish consumer is asking, what can you do for me? And you can give lecture after lecture after lecture about what you should do for the group. In the end, if you're certainly talking about the North American environment, the Western European environment, and having visited Israel, they're also part of the consumer culture. They're in the Jewish environment, so you don't have to ask them the question about what will you do for the group. The point is that in the end, whatever we do, we have to provide a benefit to the person, a perceived benefit to the person who is there. And the other thing that is what I call appropriate expectation, since I bump into it. Principle of my life I got from existentialism. People are not their intentions, expressed or otherwise. People are their behavior. So I hear about all kinds of people who say they love Jewish literature. They never read it. I know all kinds of people who say they love their Jewish identity. They don't do anything. I mean, so when we look at people, we're always looking at what they're prepared to do, not what they're prepared to say. That's why I'm always wary of surveys. When you ask people what they think or feel or believe, they most likely don't know what they think or feel or believe. The second guideline is there is no magic single strategy. I am flattered that somebody, that Yaakov and others have referred to this secular synagogue as something historic. I'd like to think that it is, but I know that it is not the only answer to this large body, quite amorphous, of unaffiliated Jews that we have. It is one answer, but not the only answer. The third guideline is that the needs of unaffiliated or disaffiliated Jews need to be served. You have to go to where they are. That is, I look at Lerner, the editor of Tikkun magazine. He runs events. He has an event on a weekend. 2,500 people come from all over the country. It's like an Est weekend, all right? They come from all over the country, and they're mobilized. They don't want to join a congregation. Well, you say to them, if you don't want to join a community, we're not interested in it. Please. Maybe one of the things we need to design for the 21st century are exciting weekends, exciting events that people want to come to. Bring a full panoply and array of interesting people. Bring the rock music. That Norman talks. Bring all these things together and give them the weekend. I mean, Egon Friedler talked about this publication, the magazine. Here's a person who may not come to a meeting and who may not join an organization, but gets a magazine. It's a piece of literature, right? That you look in the phone book, you send it to him. That's something to do. We just read about this man in the New York Times who wants to open up the Dalton of secular Jewish schools in New York, right? Milton Steinhardt. He wants the idea of a secular, humanistic day school. What if somebody doesn't want to join a synagogue or doesn't want to join a community, but is willing to send his or her child for a Jewish education to a Jewish day school? Counseling, we're talking about personal needs. What about providing counseling services to the unaffiliated? In some ways they exist within the framework of established communities, but not simply psychotherapeutic counseling, but kinds of philosophic counseling that people may need. And certainly Norman's right about the media. Until we get the money to put on effective Jewish programming in the medium that people watch all the time, that TV, You see, it's rather interesting. The people who fought science, which is the mother and father of technology, now use that technology better than the people who say they love science. We're a little hesitant about the computer, it's not warm enough, or whatever. The point is, a lot of people now conduct very warm conversations through that medium. 4, there are many kinds of communities, so we have to be very careful. There are intimate communities. Some people only want to be in a little chabura. There are informal communities, groups that don't want to have any kind of trained leader. There are existing communities. I mean, Yaakov told me about a wonderful thing in Israel. Russian social Jewish groups. Could you get them to join a formal community? No. But would they allow a teacher to come in to provide a program for them, right? Give Jewish content to a Jewish social group? Sure, they might do that. 5, there is life beyond the nuclear family. I was listening to Bernie Reisman, all right? That's very important. A lot of single people are not motivated to join communities where they feel the agenda of the community is built around children. You've got singles, you've got single parents. You now have the army of people called senior citizens. By the way, since I don't mind OLD, I'm old, but so. But I mean, you got they're no longer living with their children. They have 20, 25, 30 active years. Norman, it isn't only true that one of the groups that we have to reach are young people. Well, you mentioned the nurse. I'm talking before the nursing home. I mean, there are armies of people who have cultural interests, vital interests. How do you reach out to them? And there are gays and lesbians. I mean, we have all these people. We have all these different markets. I hesitate to use that phrase that we have to reach out to. 6, Jewish identity, in the end, is a matter of choice in this environment. So I now want to talk about something that is not talked about. Israel and North America and the diaspora, and to some degree, are in reverse motions, directions. Israel is into ethnicizing. They take Ashkenazic Jews, Sephardic Jews, Oriental Jews, and they put them in, and they have produced a new ethnicity built around the Hebrew language. And now, with intermarriage between Ashkenazim and Sephardim and Oriental Jews, they are now producing this new gene pool. It's a new gene pool defined by a language called Hebrew that did not exist before. My Mama Lashon was Yiddish, so therefore I know the group that I came from. I mean, that was its own gene pool, its own place. All right. But what's happening in America is the de-ethnicizing of the Jew. That is, with an intermarriage rate of 50 to 55%, I now bump into these kids. They've got 2 Jewish grandparents or 2 Irish grandparents. They've got 1 Jewish grandparent, 1 Irish grandparent, whatever. It's like America. Integration in this country has worked for Europeans. We no longer say European, we only say white. We no longer say Italian, Polish, whatever. We've all now become what? White. We are now set against what? Black. All right. That's the barrier. But as far as whites are concerned, so we're now in a de-ethnicized environment. How do you speak to somebody who has a multiple ethnicity about only roots? In the end, he or she can choose. Do you understand? They have a multiplicity of choices. So now this is the consumer culture. This is choosing to be Jewish, choosing not to be Jewish. I mean, after all, even in Israel, Hebrew-speaking Israeli can choose to have no interest in what created Israel. Israel is the only country in the world created by a diaspora. And in fact, to be a Jew is to say that I'm part of something greater than Israel. I'm part of something called the Jewish people. And Norman talked about the values of the diaspora. So there are diaspora values. How do I feel this connection? And Yaakov talked about it. Because Israel is indeed engaged in now, more favorably than maybe 30 or 40 years ago, in the study of that diaspora environment. But what happens is, in a consumer culture, in a free society, you choose. I mean, Joel talked about what it means to live in a free society. We can't have our cake and eat it simultaneously. We can't have all the advantages of being free, in charge of our life, being autonomous and all of that, and saying how wonderful it is to have an integrated world and a universal world and be nice to everybody, and simultaneously expect that people won't have an agenda that contains more than Jewish identity. And it may not be the highest item on their agenda. We are like the Israelis. Higher than Jewish identity is tourism. Oh, no. 7. Message is different from mission. Yesterday we got caught up in, because if you're going to make it a choice, if it isn't simply, it's the 21st century, it isn't that I'm stuck. People used to say that to me, you're stuck. Yeah, that's it. We're all stuck. I used to say that when I first started out in '63. We're stuck, here we are. We're all Jewish, so now what are we going to do about it? We're no longer simply stuck. So you have to deal with the question, what is the point in preserving Jewish identity? And therefore you can legitimately, and I respect that choice, talk about some underlying purpose. Anne Roify had reached the point where she wasn't sure she wanted to have an underlying purpose, but then she wanted an underlying purpose. It's a general Jewish condition called ambivalence. Okay, so. But, to me, you can have a message from the Jewish experience without having an underlying mystical purpose. That is, when you say to somebody, why should I connect to this history? I have a choice. Well, for me, I can only speak personally. But it's what I tell everybody when I go, I say, I came to my humanism through my Jewishness. I think the message of Jewish history and the Jewish experience is humanism. Because the message of Jewish history is very clear. It is that in the end you cannot rely on the kindness of the fates. In the end you have to rely on yourself and other people. And it's built into that thing. And the ethical message is very clear from the Jewish experience, not simply from a text. And that is, we who have gone through everything, every kind of cruelty, in the end, the message of compassion comes out of that experience. Eight, message leaders need to be trained. In the end, but we had a graduation Friday night. I enjoyed that enormously. You may have seen me kvelling. It's so gratifying to see the graduates, because they may in the end go out to organize and lead secular synagogues, communities, chavurot, whatever else it be. They may go out and be trained to be on the media, right? TV people. They may go out and organize weekend events. They may go out and they may publish a journal that would go out and reach people. There isn't only one way for message leaders to be trained, and one of the primary things we need for reaching the unaffiliated Jew is to train the kinds of people who can go out with a variety of talents to reach that audience. 9. And this leads to the discussion about God and why we sang Eifo Ori. All right. Jewish identity needs conviction. I mean, for me, one of the great tragedies for Jewish life is that after the Enlightenment, for Jews, their personal philosophy of life, what they believed was true, was divorced from their Jewishness. So today we have hosts of people who will say a bracha, a brocha, whatever else it is, and they'll say, what difference does it make what it says? It's Jewish. But when the people created it, do you understand? When they created it, the rabbinic leaders who created those brachot, they believed in it. It had the power of conviction. Those words were designed for traditional Jews. If you are a Reconstructionist, it's the reason I'm not a Reconstructionist. I spoke to Mordecai Kaplan 3 times, who said to me, Sherwin, why are you doing what you're doing? I already did it. And I said, because I don't want to have to sit down to explain why I'm saying what I'm saying. Why can't I speak clearly and directly in either Hebrew or Yiddish or English exactly what why can't I have the same privilege other people do? When we sing in this congregation, Eifo Ori, that expresses what? What we feel and believe. It's a Hebrew song. It's connected, you understand, to our vision of Jewish history. It has conviction. If we can't bring together personal philosophy and Jewishness, we've lost it for the 21st century. And last, and it turns out to be 10, and I didn't want to do it then. The process, to some degree, must begin outside. Egon Mayer referred to the fact that to a large degree establishment institutions are self-serving. They follow strategies that are consistent with where they are. You see, I think what happens in terms of creativity is it isn't that a committee from the establishment creates the alternative. It is that somebody on the outside, I mean, that's what you're talking about, somebody from the outside comes in and creates something and shakes something, somebody goes, oh-ho! And then maybe later on, then the establishment, responds to it in some way. But most of this experimentation is going to have to come from people searching for funding, because most of that funding isn't going to be coming from the establishment that's going to hold meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting about the unaffiliated. So let me just conclude. The purpose of this colloquium was to clarify the direction in which we need to go. It was not to come up with all the final answers. It was to produce a kind of focus. In order to do that, we had to hear the unaffiliated. I go to all these conferences where people get together to talk about the unaffiliated. You got to hear Ann Roife, you got to hear Andreas, you got to hear Joel's voice is, a distinguished philosophy professor, do you understand? You have to hear the voice of the people who are out there that we want, in whatever way is consistent with their dignity and conviction, to be part of the Jewish people and to identify with that thing that we call Jewish identity. So I want to conclude with what I began with. It's the message of this colloquium. We need our roots, and we need to look at the past, and Yaakov is right. We have to appreciate and respect the texts that come from the past, the creativity that came from the past. But we're here to look at the future, at the 21st century. When I went to the University of Michigan, I had a pedantic history professor. And he was not the most interesting, but he said one thing several times that I remember. And to me, it is the summary of what I'm saying. He said the following: we cannot recreate the past. We can only help to mold the future. And that's what this whole colloquium is about. Thank you very, very much.